Hello everyone, welcome back to today's analysis for 3rd of August 2023. So let's start with important topics from the Hindu newspaper. So we've been seeing clashes in the state of Haryana and the toll rises to 6. So the state home minister says the violence against the VHP Yatra in the Noor district, it seemed to be long planned and fueled by social media posts. So given in today's times when we talk about digitization and again, obviously the increased influence of social media and again then the potential threat from the rumors. So all of this is involved and how it can be tackled is the main question. So Chief Minister says that those responsible for damaging property, they will pay for it, and over 100 people have been arrested. So if it was long planned, so was it the failure of the police and the administration, or it was basically something fishy involved in this whole act? So the act against violence, hate speech at the VHP rallies, says the Supreme Court. So even the Supreme Court is monitoring this thing, and we have been seeing in the past also Supreme Court coming in specifically when it comes to dealing with the hate speech incidences, or even if like mobocracy also. So it's important to act against such violence and hate speech. This is what Supreme Court is saying. So it restricted itself to passing an omnibus order urging the center and the police to take steps to prevent this violence and hate speech at the rallies. So obviously somewhere we can say kind of political influence or even political rallies can also, fuel such types of violent incidences. So that should be prevented, and union government should immediately get in touch with these states wherever such kind of things are happening. Then coming to GST Council meeting, so it sticks to its plan to collect 28% tax on the online gaming industry. So this obviously this is a repeated topic. Then from the perspective of, broadly speaking about GST Council, firstly, why basically everything around the meeting of GST Council, why, the meetings they get delayed. So that is one issue. Apart from this, when we talk about the challenges related to GST and how they can be resolved, so that is another dimension that you can think about. And hundreds flee Gurugram slum cluster after the threats. So, what about the safety of these people? What about their rehabilitation, or where would they be moving out to? Obviously, everything comes under threat and things become uncertain when it comes to their survival. And obviously, women's safety is an important thing in this element. And then fake news, we were talking about influence of social media. So fake news and rumors, they can widely spread in such kind of circumstances. So post 1957, the president retains the power to scrap Article 370. This is what the Supreme Court has uh, ruled. So it says basically Supreme Court, it raised the question whether the president's power to declare inoperative Article 370 of the Constitution, which granted special status to Jammu and Kashmir, will not continue to hold the field after the dissolution of the erstwhile States Constituent Assembly on 26 January 1957. So clause 3 of this article 370, it gave president the power to notify article inoperative, or it can be modified also. So the power was in the hands of president, but a proviso had made it necessary that such a move would have to be recommended by the Jammu and Kashmir Constituent Assembly. So again, ये president की discretionary power नहीं थी. Only basically the president can act on the aid and advice of the Jammu and Kashmir Constituent Assembly and not on its own. So Constituent Assembly कोई permanent body नहीं है like the parliament, and the Supreme Court. So no constituent assembly can have an indefinite life as well. That is also a reality. So Jammu and Kashmir ki constituent assembly ki baat kare to it was constituted for a specific purpose to draft the constitution of Jammu and Kashmir. So it became functional official once the Jammu and Kashmir constitution that was framed. So this provision making the constituent assembly's recommendation necessary before the abrogation, it has no application. And if the proviso is ceased to operate, then surely the substantive part of clause 3 in article 370 will remain. So we are seeing the impact of violent clashes which are happening in Haryana, even in few pockets of Delhi and Noida and Delhi NCR basically. And obviously it becomes important to contain them and to restrict their spread. So another dimension adds up to the situation in Manipur regarding updation of NRC in the state. So this is a demand coming from the United Naga Council. So influx of people from Myanmar, it will create a serious demographic crisis in the state. And NRC is the only feasible mechanism to curb the unwarranted population, according to the apex body of Nagas, as it slams the center for its policy of encouraging inflow of the people. So this is basically from the perspective of the migrants and not, not that related with the current violence that is going on in the state of Manipur. So this is also an important topic of debate, specifically when we talk about the northeastern states of India. So importance of NRC, again, that needs to be debated in an objective manner. The trajectory of progress that needs to change. So let's discuss this article, and obviously it is more related to the economy. So the G20, it has provided Prime Minister an opportune stage before the next general elections and promotions of the G20 with Mr. Modi's picture, part of them, they're everywhere. And greater significance to the world is that G20 is being led by India, which is the world's most populous country. Global financial crisis ki agar hum baat kare in the last 30 years, that has also compelled G7. It is a US-led cabal of the Western countries, and Japan is also part of it, that controls the global financial institutions to expand the G20 by adding members like India, China, Russia, Brazil, and few other countries for solutions to the global problems. So basically, you can say that adding the countries that are part of Global South to G20 so as to, come up with reasonable and logical solutions to the global problems. And G20, it is at an impasse because US wants its members to shut out Russia and China also, who it sees as threats to its global hegemony. So that's what US desires for. But again, countries, they have their own sovereignty and independence when it comes to their decision making. So this cannot, go ahead as planned by US. So India, it is not easily swayed by this pressure from the G7, and it wants G20 to concentrate on agenda of 90% of humanity outside the G7. So when we talk about governance, so let's talk about what the challenges related to it. So global governance, it is in bad shape. And also when we are like going ahead in terms of scrutinizing this topic in terms of critical analysis, so you need to also keep in mind GS core paper ethics. So since we're talking about governance, so that is clearly mentioned in the syllabus as well. So moving ahead, we see that trajectory of progress that needs to change in the context of global governance framework. So world, it is being divided by wars. We are seeing wars are happening, we're seeing strife within the countries, and wars with military weapons and with the financial and trade weapons are being carried out. So desperate millions, they are being pushed back to their deaths while trying to cross the borders or oceans in search of better lives and safety. So safety of migrants becomes important, or even if we say refugees, that is an important thing. Safety of human rights is a critical area. So humanity cannot carry on the way it is, and trajectory of progress must be changed to make economic growth more equitable and sustainable. So these are the keywords. And economists, they try to prove with numbers that poverty is reducing and income, they are increasing for everyone. But again, the question comes about what the real ground situation, and the element of equity also becomes important. So they should look around and listen to real people struggling in the precarious livelihoods as well. So we can't just completely go by the numbers. And people, they experience realities with which statisticians numbers they cannot reveal. Obviously numbers can't reveal the actual ground reality, and obviously they are not, we can't say that they are universal. So planet is, it is heating up inexorably, and it cannot take the pressure of the present consumptive model of economic growth that is being followed globally. And more economic growth, it will also not solve the world problems, because more economic growth, when we're talking about that, then as we are saying, this article is based upon that we need a change in the growth trajectory. And for that, economic growth along with sustainability, along with equality and equity, is what is desired. So it must be sustainable and equitable too, as it is mentioned here clearly. So India, as chair of G20, it has offered a vision of Vasudev Kutumbakam, that is one earth, one family, one future, to bring all the citizens of the world together and make the world better for everyone. So when we talk about Vasudev Kutumbakam, again, you can interpret this in different forms. So this can be even used in essay paper as well. So to continue solve all these systematic problems at the global level, same approach that caused them, that is obviously madness and illogical. So new paradigm that is required for the global governance. So we talk about 2050, all the countries, they adopted 7 SDG goals to be achieved by 2030. But again, time is running out. So climate change is also racing ahead. Rich countries, they are unwilling to find equitable solutions. So this is one area broadly when we say, or when we talk about the global challenges. So precarity of employment, that is also increasing even in the rich countries in the developed world as well. So the SDGs, they describe 17 complex combinations of environmental, social, and the economic problems. And obviously they are not, we can say, they're not universal, or they do not appear universally in each and every country, and they do not appear in the same form as well. So here we have an example also, you can go through it. So no country, it has only one of the SDG problems also. So the things, they are complex. So talk about map of ground realities. So according to McKinsey Global Institute, it has produced a detailed map of realities on the ground. In its report of Pixels of Progress, a granular look at human development around the world. So it has divided the world into 40,000 micro regions, and using advanced statistical techniques, it zooms in to examine what is the actual progress on the ground with statistical averages. So basically, combination of ground reality, I should say micro ground reality, along with data and statistics, is what has been the approach of this report. So here we see it applies the yardsticks of the life expectancy of the incomes to compare the well-being of the people in these regions. So finally, when we come to the conclusion of this report, to understand the outcome of it. So it says the growth of GDP at a country level, it explains only 20% of the progress on the ground. So you can see that when we're talking about GDP numbers, GDP growth numbers of any country, that is only explaining the 20% of ground reality. So you can imagine how then even the policies and schemes that needs to be formulated. But again, because we can't completely rely on the numbers. So remaining 80%, that is local and specific. So that's why we talk about the importance of decentralization of bottom-up approach. So the present theory in use of the top-down problem solving, that is also conceptually flawed, because when we are saying that 80% of the reality that is local and specific and that is not taken into account in terms of the numbers, so even when we come to or when we talk about the problem solving approach, even that needs to be the bottom up approach, and it cannot be helpful when we are going ahead with a top down approach for problem solving. So complex systemic problems that appear in many places, they require local system solutions, the traditional solutions that can better address them. So even India, we have proposed an approach of life, which means lifestyles for sustainable development in G20. So for that, we need coherent actions amongst the stakeholders at all the levels, rooted in collective actions across the society. And then principle 7 of life is also, it requires the world's leaders to recognize and amplify role of local communities, local and regional governments, Panchayati Raj, the traditional knowledge, its importance and relevance in today's times in supporting the sustainable lifestyles. So everything local at local level becomes extremely important, whether it is the political system or the traditional knowledge or other cultural practices which can act as solution to different challenges. So here, talking specifically about the local governance, we see democracy is government of, for, and by the people. So government that is elected by the people, it provides benefits. Top down to the people is not a complete democracy. So government must be by the people themselves too. And India, we have elections, but its citizens, they do not have the Purna Swaraj yet. So that is basically, you can interpret this in modern sense. And its political leaders since independence, they have paid only lip service to the vision of local governance. So how we can basically improve the functioning and effectiveness of local governance in India is one dimension which you can think more about. From state visit to a more robust trade relationship. So here, Prime Minister Modi's visit to Washington, it was historic, the first for an Indian head state in 14 years, and only the third of an Indian leaders in 75 years since Indian independence. So it unambiguously demonstrated the Biden administration's intense desire to cultivate India as a durable, long-term partner in a variety of realms, including in the United States strategic competition with China for the foreseeable future. So, central role for the trade. So, in comparison with the substantial progress in many areas, when we talk about economic and more specifically trade relationship between India and US, so that is growing and it has surpassed $120 billion, but it continues to underperform relative to the sheer potential that it holds. So यहाँ पे हमने बात करी कि India US का trade relationship is growing and we talked about that it's crossed $120 billion mark. But again, when we talk about the reality, what are the challenges? So that also exists because there still exists huge potential of growth in terms of trade between the two countries. And India is exhibiting a remarkable openness to negotiating new trade relationships. So, agar hum recently, if we talk about India is trying to strengthen its trade relationship not just with US, but we are using free trade agreements in order to bolster trade relationship bilaterally. So that's there. And We can see we have signed FTAs that is mentioned here, FTAs with UAE, Australia, and we have reinvigorated negotiations for the parallel deals with European Union, UK, and Canada as well. So if we talk about the USA's approach, so we see the Biden administration, it maintains that it has evolved away from the FTAs. So they are basically not relying on FTAs and they've discovered a better approach to trade. So that is emphasizing resilient supply chains, reshoring or friendshoring, and prioritizing labor rights and climate friendlier production over craven and mistaken globalization. So this policy, it has many skeptics at home in US also and abroad. And so this is basically US's approach. Obviously, this is completely different from the current India's approach when it comes to increasing its trade. So talking about FTA, so were they to embark on FTA negotiations, or we could expect more extensive agreement on the agricultural sector writ large, in addition to the full range of trade in goods and services and facilitation of higher levels of investment between the two. So Modi state visit, it should be a starting point for a more ambitious trade agenda going forward. So when we talk about the military coup in Niger, so France and US, they can push for talks to restore democracy there. And obviously, this need not be something which becomes a long-lasting solution in Niger, because we are seeing in most part of, or even, most of the countries in Africa, we are seeing military coup. And we had a look at the location of Niger. So that is also an important thing, and it's located in the Sahel region. When we also talk about the importance of Niger as a country, so we talked about the mineral resources, richness of the country. So that's there. So Jeddah, hope for people, a hope for peace in Ukraine. So has the time for effective peace negotiation arrived or not, as far as Russia-Ukraine war is concerned? What is expected from the upcoming meeting that is going to be there in Saudi Arabia, in Jeddah, its capital? What is the plan जो China propose कर रहा है, and what about initiatives by the African countries? So African countries का क्या role रहा है in this war, and India का क्या stand है on peace talks? So these are different dimensions related to this. So here we have a map of Ukraine as well, and what are the areas that have been captured by Russia and the areas which are still under Ukraine's control, or we can say they have been recaptured from Russia's control. So 500 days of war in Ukraine and Russia's invasion of Ukraine, it is far-reaching human tragedy that shows no sign of drawing to a close. So this year in prelims, we had a question, the countries which borders Ukraine. So that was a very obvious question. And here you can see Moldova, Romania, Hungary, Slovakia, Poland, Belarus, and Russia is there. So you need to know about the important ports and then different sea and the straits which are located around Ukraine, important nuclear power plants, and the areas that have been captured, like the areas which are in news as well. Then the geography of Ukraine, that also becomes important, the rivers. So Kharkiv is located here, Bakhmut, Dnipro, Donetsk, Luhansk. So here even timeline has also been shown that it was captured when. So the red colored area, they are under the Russia's control. The greens one are under Ukraine. So these have basically been regained from the Russia's control. So military losses, obviously it is very high. So 15,500 plus people have died and 1,09,000 people have been wounded. So this is in Ukraine, and from Russia side, 35,500 plus people have died. 1,80,000 have been wounded. So of the total, we see 9,800 have died and around 15,000 they have been injured. So this is the confirmed civilian casualties. And talking about then refugees, so over 8 million, 5.9 million internally displaced people, and 17.6 million in need of humanitarian aid. So economy has shrunk by 30%, and reconstruction estimate costs are somewhere around $411 billion. So we can say infrastructural damage to the tune of $400 billion has already been caused. So these are some linear things that need to be known, apart from obviously what has been the global impact of this war, and specifically in the context of India, the negative and the positives of out of this war. So talking about कि China ने क्या peace plan propose किया है. So in February, China it came out with the 12-point plan for political settlement of this Ukraine crisis. So 12 point plans, you need to like, you can just go through these 12 points. So while the Chinese Foreign Ministry, they've promoted it as the launch of peace initiative by Beijing, it was seen as an attempt to placate criticism of its silence on the Russia's actions as a repetition of its already expressed positions on the war. And while Kyiv outrightly rejected this proposal, Russia has said that it could serve as a basis for some process aimed at search for peace. So Ukraine has completely, basically, we can say, rejected, or it is not going ahead with this proposal from China. So plan it reiterated China's support for the territorial integrity of the states and the UN Charter, and it condemned using of nuclear power in the wars. It called for ceasing of the hostilities and resumption of talks. So it called for abandoning Cold War mentality, adding that security should not be achieved by expanding military alliances. So this is somewhere pointing towards NATO expansion. So talking about the peace initiatives that have been proposed by Africa and others. So around leaders of 7 African countries led by South African President Cyril Ramaphosa. So visited Russia and Ukraine with a 10-point proposal which suggested recognition of Russia and Ukraine's sovereignty, release of prisoners. So it called for keeping exports of the food grains unhindered and de-escalation of fighting, and for the peace negotiations between the two sides to start at the earliest. So these were some of the points that were emphasized by under this peace plan by Africa. So security has been intensified as tribes, they plan the mass burial of 35 bodies. So additional forces have been rushed to Bishnupur, Churchandrapur district in Manipur to prevent violence between the two varying communities in the Manipur, the tribals and the majority Metis. And we have talked about different dimensions, different challenges, and state failure or the police failure, and again, intervention of Supreme Court. So these are some of the latest developments around it. And definitely it's an important topic from internal security. So women in the local bodies, they are agents of change, or you can say they act as catalyst of change. So Prime Minister said that India's 1.4 million elected women representatives in the local bodies, they have been key agents of economic, environmental and the social change in India. Now you have three dimensions. आप इनके बारे में थोड़ा और डिटेल में सोचोगे कि क्या changes आए हैं because of women presence at the local level. And again, here we're just talking about the local level. So you can think कि national politics में how women they can contribute. So women's economic empowerment, it fuels growth. Their access to education drives global progress. So when women prosper, the world prospers. So we see Om Birla, the Lok Sabha speaker, he skips the proceedings of Lok Sabha to convey displeasure over the disruptions in the House by opposition. So the Delhi Services Bill, it was not taken up, as we saw that there were protests which were led by multiple adjournments. And Speaker is said to have told the floor leaders of opposition parties as well as government managers that he would attend only if the dignity of the House is upheld. So herein comes the question of the constitutional responsibility over the Lok Sabha Speaker versus, again, the ethical conduct, we can say, or his displeasure. So somewhere we can say that this is a situation of ethical dilemma for the Lok Sabha Speaker, and again, this is directly related to GS4 paper ethics. So the chairman of Rajya Sabha says that he can't direct the prime minister to be present in the house. No direction can be issued as such. And because the opposition members, they have continued their demand for a statement by the prime minister on Manipur. So that's why Rajya Sabha chairman said he could not issue a directive to the prime minister to be present in the house. So this is the current situation. Opposition is not letting the parliament to function, and obviously it is impacting the efficiency, the quality of democracy, and the governance. And we see one more cheetah dies at the Kuno National Park, taking the toll to 6. So we have lost 6 cheetahs already, and female was sourced from South Africa. So it's believed to have died of a parasitic infection after repeatedly scratching its skin and wounding itself again and again. So we've been raising questions. We have been discussing about the success of this project Cheetah and the displeasure that the foreign experts they have showed that they were not being transparently they were not getting the information at a transparent level from the Indian authorities regarding the cheetahs, their performance or their condition. So that is one thing. The opaqueness in this entire process is clearly reflected, and that is one of the reasons of its possible failure as well. So Russian drone strikes, it hits the Ukrainian port that is key to the grain export. So obviously, if this attack is being carried out, so it would be again furthering the food inflation, the global level. And we've been seeing that Russia is backed out from the Black Sea grain deal. So that is impacting the supply of food grains at the global level, given India has also banned the export of wheat and rice. So streets, they turn into rivers as Beijing records heavy rain. So impact of climate change, you can see a picture with flood, and capital, it has just experienced heaviest rainfall in 140 years. So the state media warned that 130 million people, they would be affected by extremely heavy rainfall. So what is important from Indian perspective is how China is going to deal with the situation, if it is prepared to deal with it or not, and what learnings can we have from China. So China plans to limit the children's smartphone time to 2 hours. The China's cyberspace watchdog, it has put forward this plan to limit the usage of smartphones by the children to no more than 2 hours a day, and to require all the tech companies to introduce the minor mode to enable the restrictions. So in mobile phones, it is soon you will be also seeing minor mode, like we have airplane mode. So draft guidelines for this have been issued. So it is going to be part of some of the world's most strictest regulations for children in usage of smartphones. The government kicks off the contractual dispute settlement scheme. So let's understand about it in more detail. So Vivad Se Vishwas 2 scheme, it aims to settle down the disputes between the government and its vendors, contractors, suppliers to the government and its undertakings can file the claims by 31st October. So herein, smooth settlement would be carried out, and the scheme it applies to all the domestic contractual disputes where government is a party, and government is going to offer contractors settlement amounts of up to 85% of net amount awarded by the court. So we have finally passed a law which is allowing private firms to bid for and mine lithium in India. So India's parliament has passed this law allowing the government to auction and mine its newly discovered reserves of lithium. Again, lithium is very important raw material, and specifically it is used in making electric vehicles batteries. So we can say that it's part of critical mineral list as well. So under this law, lithium, along with other minerals, it was removed from a previous list of the atomic minerals. And upon removal of these minerals from the list, so exploration and mining of these minerals, it will be open to private sector. So as a result, exploration and mining of these minerals is expected to increase significantly in the country. And we saw that lithium reserves, they were discovered in Jammu and Kashmir. So when talk about titanium and beryllium as well. So now they would also be open for mining and auction. So titanium, beryllium, niobium, and zirconium are also a part of it. So we see rupee sliding, and it has posted the steepest slide in almost 6 months. So here rupee is weakening, basically it's depreciating. So that is good for exports, but not for imports. And when we talk about its, favoring our exports in terms of improved competitiveness, but again, there is a time lag between that. And obviously, when we talk about depreciation and imports, so it makes imports expensive, and obviously that does not have much of time gap. So in the short run, it is not a good sign. So here we have the topic, the hopes and fears. So India and the slouching dragon, they're talking about China. So here you can see the data, the comparison for India, China, and the world. So China and India, they're expected to account for more than 50% of the global growth this year. So struggling Chinese economy, it can smoother the nascent global recovery as well. So here we having the figures for different years for India, China, and the world. So starting from 2021, this is obviously in terms of growth. So we grew at 9.1%, China at 8.4%, and the world grew at 6%. Then it's fell sharply in 2022, 7.2. China maybe saw a sharp decline. It fell down to 3. And even the global level, it was recorded at 3.5%. Then it further slowed down in India. This year, obviously, these are some estimations, not the actual figures for 2023, and obviously projection for the next year. So in China, however, the projection says it'll be growing in this year, but again, fall would be there the next year, and the global level it would be somewhere sustaining around 3% growth rate. So world's factory is slowing down, and this has prompted the urgent questions about why the world's second largest economy is getting sluggish. So talking about China, and economic growth is not that promising there. So as to the impact on India, so obviously India pe kya impact hoga because of growth slowdown even in China. That is one thing. So there is both good and bad news for India. So right now, अगर China की economy की performance की बात करें, तो we see that it is $18 trillion of economy. It is slowing down significantly. So चाहे आप manufacturing purchasing managers index की बात करो, that has declined, and China's services PMI that has also fallen. Then we see economy in Q2 of this year, it is grew it by just 0.8%. In China's economy, it will expand by 5.2 this year compared to growth of 3% the previous year. And government, it has refrained from announcing any major stimulus so far, and it has been measured in its efforts to revive the growth. So obviously, fiscal policy measures, they become important because when we talk about recovery, so supply side disruptions that needs to be tackled and resolved. So reason kya hai behind this slowdown? So we see crisis in the property market, exports are also falling, and weak consumer sentiments or spending or the demand. So these are three main reasons. And China, may we see the home sales, they fell by 33%. So that's quite big. And construction sector, it accounts for around 20% of the China's GDP. So a fall of 33% becomes massive. And demand from the developed nations, even that has declined sharply. So that is impacting the exports. And obviously that is because of increase in the interest rates to control and regulate inflation. So shifting of manufacturing away from China as part of de-risking strategy by the global players is also contributing to lower exports. And when we talk about China plus one strategy, so it is under that. And all of these have caused unemployment in China, especially amongst the youth. So this has weakened the domestic consumer spending. So that is the current situation in China. So इसका global economy पे क्या impact होगा? So according to IMF, it says that 1 percentage point growth in China leads to 0.3 percentage point of growth in other countries. So 1% growth in China, 0.3% growth is caused in other countries because of this. So a struggling Chinese economy, it will smother the nascent global recovery. And IMF says the global growth this year will now be just 3%. China and India that together expected to account for more than 50% of global growth. So क्या चाइना के स्लो डाउन से इंडिया को कोई बेनिफिट होगा कि नहीं होगा? So since China slows, so will its demand for the oil and other commodities, which means Indian firms can access them at lower prices or not? So India can increase its share in global supply chain. Then when we see the fear of era of high growth rates in its history of China, so this will increase the attractiveness of India as an alternative sourcing destination for goods and services. So India can be one of the potential destination countries under the China plus one strategy. And क्या इसके negative impact होंगे on India's growth? So yes, obviously they would be there, and China India का second biggest trading partner है. तो अगर China में slowdown होगा तो obviously exports पे भी major impact आएगा. So it accounts for around 11.2% of India's trade, goods trade specifically. So China अगर struggle करेगा in terms of growth, so Chinese population will consume less, which means lower Indian exports from India to China. So Chinese goods being dumped into India, this chances will also increase. And obviously कहीं ना कहीं इंडिया के जो small businesses है उसको negatively impact करेगा. So that's why we need to be more vigilant when it comes to anti-dumping measures. And when we talk about India's dependence on China, like in case of active pharmaceutical ingredients or solar photovoltaic cells and the battery parts for the electric vehicles, so the supply disruption could be visible because of slowdown in China. So that would be negative impact, a possible negative impact on India's economy. So this we've already seen. Prime Minister says that when women prosper, the world prospers. So their access to education drives the global progress. Their leadership fosters inclusivity, and their voices inspire a positive change. So again, you can interpret this. What positive changes? Coming to Financial Express newspaper, so this we've already seen. GST Council gives some relief to e-gaming firms. And so the FAME scheme, it may get subsumed into the PLI scheme. So FAME is faster adoption and movement of electric and hybrid vehicles. So इसको subsume किया जा सकता है under the PLI scheme. So center, it is holding stakeholder consultations before this final decision. Government wants balanced view, as other schemes like auto and ACC PLIs, they have similar objectives. So FAME जो scheme है, that is meant to create demand for electric vehicles, and it has a total outlay of rupees 10,000 crores. So because of Fitch downgrading of the US growth, so इसका impact India के external sector पे क्या होगा, and growth is going to be marginal. Basically मतलब इतना कोई major impact नहीं होगा because of this downgrading of the growth forecast by Fitch for the US economy. तो उसका इंडिया के ऊपर, इंडिया के एक्सटर्नल सेक्टर पे और ग्रोथ पे marginal impact is expected. So any appreciation of the rupee is going to be short-lived. आज हमने बात करी one of the steepest decline in rupee. So जो Fitch it is decision to downgrade the US government's credit rating. Sorry, it is not about growth. It is about credit rating agencies of the US, the performance, the quality of performance and functioning, the governance. So that has been downgraded by Fitch. So the top level, it is unlikely to take the sheen of the US treasuries as the safest liquid investment option for the global financial capital. As market sentiments, they will continue to be supported by dollar's reserve status. So ये आप again dollar का जो reserve status is, still dollar remains one of the strongest currencies globally. तो वो एक कहीं ना कहीं major attraction है for the investments that go into the US. So simply because of this downgrade, इतना कोई major change या impact नहीं आने वाला है on investors' decisions. So that's there. So reserve currency dollar, again इसको आप de-dollarization से भी relate कर सकते हो आज के time में. So you need to have clarity about that as well. And economists and trade analysts, they feel so. So since US, it will try and adjust the exchange value of its currency to offset any marginal impact of the credit graders' action in the forex market. Agar we see any appreciation in emerging marketing currencies like Indian rupee, so that may be marginal and only short-lived. So agricultural exports, they also dipped by 14%. So export sector, the performance is going to be a little challenging in coming times. So transactions via UPI, they are close to $10 billion mark. That's huge. So growth in transactions, it has come when the government has been trying to take UPI to other countries for cross-border transactions as well. तो duopoly का current example अगर हम बात भी करें, so telecom sector is one of the industries, but again union minister says that there is no duopoly as telecom will remain a four-player market. So growing intensity and the complexity of domestic internet with Internet of Things on the back of 5G, I see no reason why there will be anything less than four viable telecom operators. So right now, अगर हम major telecom operators की बात करें in the Indian industry, so that's Airtel and Jio. So that's there. So soon we are going to have the e-commerce policy, and government is close to finalizing the national e-commerce policy and the rules that could be announced. So rules हमारे लिए जानना बहुत important हो जाएगा. Coming to Indian Express newspaper, so opposition meets the president, presses the demand for PM's statement on Manipur. So they ask the president to step in for peace in Manipur and fix accountability. So कहीं ना कहीं again Supreme Court ने भी यही चीज बोली है कि who is actually accountable for the situation in Manipur, and जो FIRs भी की गई उस पे ऐसा कोई major actions लिए गए ऐसा कुछ भी विजिबल नहीं है सामने. तो फार्मा सेक्टर के लिए अगर हम रूल्स एंड गाइडलाइंस की बात करें, सो अडॉप्ट इट्स गवर्नमेंट ने बोला है कि इट्स इम्पोर्टेंट टू अडॉप्ट द WHO स्टैंडर्ड गुड मैन्युफैक्चरिंग प्रैक्टिसेस बिकम्स इम्पोर्टेंट आफ्टर द इंसिडेंसेस जो नामीबिया में देखे गए. इंडिया को जो कफ सिरप की वजह से वी सॉ चिल्ड्रन डाइंग बिकॉज ऑफ दैट. अगेन आई ड्रॉप्स में भी जो इंडिया ने यूएसए में एक्सपोर्ट किए थे तो उसकी वजह से भी आई इन्फेक्शन रिपोर्ट किए गए. सो क्वालिटी ऑफ India's pharmaceutical drugs that came under question. So that's why it's important to follow the WHO standard for good manufacturing practices. So government, it has set the deadline for the pharma companies to comply with them. So quality control की बात करें, only 2,000 of the 10,500 manufacturing units जो हैं, they have been found compliant with the WHO guidelines or the standards. Out of 10,500 manufacturing units जो इंडिया में हैं, सिर्फ 2,000 ऐसे हैं who have been found compliant. Otherwise, you can then imagine कि क्या quality है, क्या compromise किया जा रहा होगा. So now all will have to implement these revised standards and the guidelines, ensuring the quality of medicines here for the domestic market and also for exports and abroad, that is not compromised at any cost. So अगर हम बात करें जो नूह डिस्ट्रिक्ट में वायलेंस हुई है इन हरियाणा, सो एक इंसिडेंस है कि जज एंड हर 3-year-old daughter they had to hide after the mob attack in Nuh. according to an FIR. So चाहे आप जज की बात करो, एक आम इंसान की बात करो, all are equal क्योंकि सबकी लाइफ को थ्रेट होता है ऐसे सिचुएशन में. एंड इफ अ पर्सन इज अ जज तो ये नहीं बोल सकते कि he or she becomes much more important compared to a common person. So participate in the Grand Festival of Unmesha. So it's an international literary festival. And Utkarsh is the festival of folk and tribal expressions. So event highlights were mentioned. Panel discussion on bhakti, cinema, and tribal literature. So these are some of the important themes that you need to be, aware about in a little more detail, the basic things. Then cultural performances would be there by 1,000 plus artists, reflecting spirit of Ek Bharat, Shresht Bharat, and participants from around 575 uh, participants are there from 14 countries representing 100 plus languages. And books from Sahitya Academy would be on exhibition. Cultural presentation by tribal communities would also be a part of it. So it's happening in the Ravindra Bhavan Bhopal in MP. So here you can see the chairman of Rajya Sabha says ki give every member of parliament a copy of Vedas. So he also informed about this to the education minister also. So Vedas की copy हर एक MP को दी जानी चाहिए. And given how opposition is disrupting the functioning of the parliament. So Rajya Sabha Chairman Jagdeep Dhangad asked the Education Minister to provide a copy of Vedas to all the MPs, after which he would ask members to distribute 100 copies each. So as Pradhan, he was replying to a question about the Vedic schools during the question hour in the Rajya Sabha. Chairman said, Honorable Minister, it will be greatly appreciated if you make available to the Honorable MPs a set of Vedas. सो मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ होम अफेयर्स का कहना ये है कि लास्ट के 2 साल की अगर हम बात करें तो जो साइकेट्रिक केसेस हैं इन दी पैरामिलिट्री दैट हैज इंक्रीज्ड बाय 38%. सो मेंटल हेल्थ चाहे आप किसी भी डोमेन में बात करो आज के टाइम में इट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट how you are going to deal with such cases and ensure कि they do not increase in future. So Jharkhand state is planning to come up with a anti-cheating bill, and it proposes up to life term and rupees 10 crores of fine. So there is a need for a stringent law. So the Jharkhand Public Service Commission, it conducts the combined civil services examinations at the state level. So they have conducted 7 examinations since 2000, and all of them, they have been mired in controversy. So cheating in examinations, usko tackle karne ke liye they'll be coming up with this bill. सो शटडाउन कोई क्योर नहीं है, कोई ऑप्शन नहीं है या कोई सोल्यूशन नहीं है in order to deal with any situation of violence. So there is no evidence to support कि अगर limited internet shutdowns हम करते हैं, so they have been successful in dealing with such situations, but much data to show the harm they can do. Basically, limited internet availability की वजह से ज़्यादा फायदा होने की बजाय ज़्यादा नुकसान जरूर हो सकता है. So limited internet shutdown on social media, it only curbs the spread of viral clips. मतलब in terms of containing the spread of rumors and fake news, वो contain करने में help जरूर करता है, but it can spur the citizens to peacefully protest. Basically, that can spur the citizens to peacefully protest and demand state accountability. So quantitative analysis अगर हम करें, it suggests that violent mobilization seems to grow in intensity during internet blackouts as people they lose the ability to peacefully protest. So बहुत सारी studies की गई हैं, but we do not need to look beyond our newspapers for that. And each week there is a report of Indians put at risk due to forceful deprivation of internet access. So इस पे पूरा we can think about it, क्या limited internet shutdowns या complete internet shutdowns is the viable option or not. So it is not a novel idea. One of the earliest endorsements, it is found in litigations in Gujarat High Court. So in its 2015 decision, so High Court ने बोला कि orders were proportional because they only prohibited mobile internet access. The restriction on access to medium, basically wired या wireless internet connections, while the most common जो medium है, is one of the four primary methods to implement limited internet shutdowns. So there can be restrictions on time कि कितने time के लिए it would be available. Localization to a geographical area could be there, and those used to block or whitelist the specific websites or class of services. So all four, they are used in different variations by different state governments given जो भी situation है state में. So यहाँ पे हर एक ये जो four methods mentioned है उसको discuss किया गया है. So VC की जो final method है of only banning virtual private networks, social media and internet messaging applications जो है वो ज़्यादा popular देखा गया है recent times में. So even if one person it agrees with it in principle, so उसकी enforcement जो है वो difficult हो जाती है. So we see कि government level पे ऐसी कोई major study नहीं की गई है in order to examine the intended objectives of such internet shutdowns. And that's why we don't have any as such empirical data on the outcomes and its significance and relevance also. So we have ample evidence it exists both for the social and economic harms of the shutdowns. So social harm भी हो सकता है, economic harm भी हो सकता है because of internet shutdown. So some studies they suggest social media it creates greater state accountability. So जो qualitative study है, one of the studies in Manipur, it quotes an interview of a female protester and that led to one of the biggest rallies in Imphal. So she said, I was a part of it. Cases under trial now. Whatever information we got, we kept sharing it and posting it on FB. So she said that hence a limited internet shutdown on social media, it only curbs the spread of viral clips. But quantitative analysis की अगर हम बात करें, it suggests violent mobilization seems to grow in intensity ऐसे time period पे जब internet blackout देखे गए हैं, because people they lose the ability to peacefully protest. So one valid question after what we saw in Joshimath, the deep cracks that developed, कि if mountains are turning into places which are unfit for habitation, so जो mountain dwellers हैं, वो कहाँ पे जाएंगे? उनके लिए क्या किया जा रहा है या ऐसा कुछ major thing that is being done or thought of for them? तो यहाँ पे हम डिलिमिटेशन की बात कर रहे हैं, तो इट इज बीइंग सेड और बिलीव्ड कि बिकॉज ऑफ डिलिमिटेशन एक्सरसाइज इट कुड शार्पन द फॉल्ट लाइंस बिटवीन कंट्रीज नॉर्थ एंड साउथ. सो ये इनइक्वालिटी को प्रिवेंट करना इम्पोर्टेंट है. सो कॉन्वर्सेशंस दे शुड बिगिन ऑन वेज in order to ensure कि that does not happen. So democracy में अगर हम बात करें, recognizing a person's equal voice, that is important. But recognizing regional balance of power in a federal structure, that is also equally important and essential. So that's why कुछ ऐसी states हैं which have, given the same number of seats to all the units in one chamber of their parliament. So this is important to maintain. यहाँ पे थोड़ा डेटा के थ्रू भी एक्सप्लेन किया गया है, so you can just go through it, but मेन मुद्दा यही है. So ये हम already आज डिस्कस कर चुके हैं. You can just go through it once again if you want to. Search for no resistance, so an important topic from science. So it's talking about superconductivity. It is the state in which a material it offers zero resistance. So ये important है, याद रखना कि zero resistance. आप वैसे अगर normally सोचोगे कि zero resistance actually real life में होना possible नहीं है, but superconductivity की जब हम बात करते हैं तो उस केस में resistance zero रहता है to electric current flow. So possibilities this offers are huge, but superconductivity it is possible only at super low temperatures. So कुछ दिन पहले हमने बात करी थी an experiment जिसमें result ये आया कि room temperature पे भी superconductivity possible है. So that was obviously it can, bring major changes in real life. So many people they have claimed to achieve room temperature superconductivity, but ऐसा कोई claim नहीं है that has established this thing. So इसके ऊपर ये पूरा आर्टिकल बेस्ड है. आप यू कैन जस्ट गो थ्रू इट, यू कैन जस्ट स्कैन. इतना डिटेल में जाने की जरूरत नहीं है. नीड टू बी क्लियर विद द मेन आइडिया. So how Aadhaar is seeking to use artificial intelligence to tackle the bank payment frauds. So कैसे आधार और AI साथ में मिलके इंश्योर करेंगे कि जो बैंक पेमेंट फ्रॉड्स होते हैं, फाइनेंशियल फ्रॉड्स होते हैं, वो ना हो. So basically we are seeing पेमेंट फ्रॉड्स की प्रॉब्लम की सीरियसनेस के बारे में बात की गई है. वी सी की अकॉर्डिंग टू अ रिपोर्ट बाय द पार्लियामेंट्री स्टैंडिंग कमेटी ऑन फाइनेंस, इट इज हेडेड बाय द बीजेपी एमपी जयंत सिन्हा. वॉल्यूम ऑफ फाइनेंशियल क्राइम्स जो इंडिया में रिपोर्ट किए गए, it went up from 2.62 lakhs in 2022 approximately 7 lakh in 2022. So just in 2 years you can see कि कितना massive increase हुआ है in financial crimes. And RBI का भी data है, so that is also quoted here. It is showing कि it has increased from 7 lakh to 20 lakh such related frauds. And it's important कि we work upon the awareness of cyber fraud. Significant number of people they do not report these such instances, so that is also important. And technology हमें किस हद तक help कर सकती है in addressing this problem. So especially since we see sizable number of जो ऐसे frauds हैं over the years, they have had a similar modus operandi. So that was involving participation of key actor in the payments supply chain, that is business correspondent. So business correspondent जो है, he is a person जो एक informal bank agent है, who is equipped with biometric sale of point machine. So that works like एक micro ATM की तरह machine function करती है. So अगर किसी को suppose ₹500 चाहिए, तो they will have to give their bank details to this person of who's called the business correspondent along with their Aadhaar based biometric details. So this person will give them the money after this proper authentication. So bank details भी provide करनी पड़ती हैं, which is obviously very sensitive details. Confidential रखना उनको important है, and आधार based biometric details भी देना important हो जाते हैं. So काफी बार ऐसा देखा गया है कि जैसे बैंकिंग कॉरेस्पॉन्डेंट्स हैं, एक गलत अमाउंट एंटर कर देते हैं that they have paid and input a higher amount. मतलब अगर सपोज डिमांड थी कि 500 हमें रुपीज चाहिए, तो बैंकिंग कॉरेस्पॉन्डेंट ज्यादा अमाउंट डाल देते हैं. सो अनसस्पेक्टिंग इंडिविजुअल्स ऑफन इन रूरल एरिया स्पेसिफिकली ऐसे केसेस ज्यादा देखे गए हैं, क्योंकि जो बैंकिंग कॉरेस्पॉन्डेंट्स है रूरल एरियाज में लोगों को फाइनेंशियल इंक्लूजन के लिए उनका मेन पर्पस यही है कि रूरल एरियाज में जो लोगों की डिमांड है फाइनेंशियल सर्विसेज के लिए वो फुलफिल की जाए. सो वी सी कि ऑफन इन रूरल एरियाज दे डू नॉट इंसिस्ट ऑन द रिसिप्ट ऑल्सो, मतलब लोग डिनाई कर देते कि हमें रिसिप्ट की कॉपी नहीं चाहिए. सो दे ऑल्सो फेल टू नो कि कितना अमाउंट एंटर किया गया उन्होंने, क्योंकि वो अमाउंट ही ज्यादा एंटर कर देते हैं जो कि गलत होता है. सो अगर हम AI बेस्ड टेक्नोलॉजीज यूज करेंगे, दे आर बेटर इक्विप्ड टू डील विद इंस्टेंसेस ऑफ फिंगरप्रिंट क्लोनिंग, एटलीस्ट इन थ्योरी. तो देखते हैं जब इनको हम एक्चुअली यूज करेंगे तब क्या रिजल्ट्स रहेंगे. बट अगर हम बात करें उनका फिंगरप्रिंट क्लोनिंग में, तो ऐसे जो फ्रॉड किए जाते हैं तो वो हम प्रिवेंट करने में सक्सेसफुल हो सकते हैं. बाकी डिपेंड करता है कि प्रैक्टिकली उनको यूज करने के बाद क्या चैलेंजेस रहेंगे. सो डिजिटल पर्सनल डेटा प्रोटेक्शन बिल की बात करें, ग्रेटर कंट्रोल ऑफ फॉर द सेंटर एंड जो सेंसरशिप प्रोविजंस है दैट्स लाइकली. सो ये हम बात कर चुके हैं. क्रिटिकल एनालिसिस ऑफ दिस बिल ऑलरेडी इज बीइंग डन. एंड ये भी हमने देख लिया है कि जो फिच की रेटिंग है फॉर द क्रेडिट रेटिंग एजेंसीज ऑफ यूएस, इंडिया को कितना इम्पैक्ट होगा कितना नहीं होगा, क्या पॉजिटिव क्या नेगेटिव, दिस वी हैव टेकन अप. सो ग्लोबल ग्रेन प्राइसेस हायर बिकॉज यूक्रेन में जो पोर्ट है उस पर रशिया ने अटैक किया है. सो वन ऑफ द इम्पैक्ट्स ऑफ दिस वॉर ग्लोबली. So that is all for today. Thank you so much for joining us in this session. I hope the topics and the relevant dimensions that we discussed are clear to all of you, and do subscribe to the channel, and also do not forget to like this video.